The sound that ripped from Elara's throat was not one of heartbreak, but of pure, unadulterated fury. It was a guttural, primal thing, torn from a place so deep within her she hadn't known it existed. The expensive champagne flute, a moment ago a symbol of a perfect, glittering future, left her hand in a swift, violent arc. It didn't hit Julian, though her aim was true enough. He flinched, a masterpiece of tailored Italian suit and artfully tousled blonde hair, and the crystal shattered against the marble pillar just behind him, raining down like 1,000 disappointed stars. "You did what?" she hissed, her voice low and trembling. The hum of 200 polite conversations in the museum's grand hall had ceased entirely. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on them, a sea of sequins and black tie, their gazes of physical weight. "Elara, darling, not here," Julian murmured, his smile a tight, public-facing mask. He took a step towards her, hands raised in a placating gesture that made her want to shatter another glass. "Let's discuss this like adults." "Adults?" She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "An adult would have told me he was accepting a job in Tokyo before our engagement party. An adult wouldn't have planned to discuss our future after I'd already put my entire life on hold to follow him. You were just going to let me stand here in this stupid, beautiful dress and make a fool of myself." A phone was raised in her periphery, then another. The cold, unblinking red recording dots were like malevolent fireflies in the opulent dimness. She saw them, registered them, and in her rage, she didn't care. "It's a tremendous opportunity," Julian said, his voice losing its patient edge. "For us. I thought you'd be supportive." Supportive? Elara's world had narrowed to the man in front of her. The man she had loved for 3 years. The man whose coffee she knew how to make just right, whose favorite book she could quote, whose quiet insecurity she had held in the dark of night. Now, he was a stranger. "You made this decision for us without me. That's not a partnership, Julian. That's a dictatorship, and I am not one of your subjects." She grabbed the heavy, antique-looking ring from her left hand. It felt cold and foreign. With a final, searing look of contempt, she threw it at his feet. It landed with a dull, insignificant clink on the polished marble. "You can take your opportunity, Julian, and you can take your ring, but you do not get to take my dignity." She turned, her emerald green silk dress swirling around her like a stormy sea, and walked out of the hall, her head held high, the echo of her heels the only sound in the crushing silence. It was only when the heavy museum doors swung shut behind her, enveloping her in the cool, indifferent night air, that the dam broke. The fury evaporated, leaving a hollow, aching void. Sobs racked her body, silent and violent, as she stumbled down the grand steps, completely and utterly alone. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, the video was everywhere. "Museum meltdown. Jilted girlfriend's epic public breakup," screamed one headline. "Art of the breakup. Socialite Elara Thorne goes wild at engagement party," blared another. The comments were a special kind of hell. They called her hysterical, dramatic, a walking red flag. They praised Julian for his calm demeanor in the face of her tantrum. They made gifs of her throwing the champagne flute, set to comical sound effects. Her phone blew up with a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. She turned it off. She drew the blackout curtains in her apartment, a space that still held traces of Julian, a book on his nightstand, a sweater in her closet. The world had seen her most vulnerable, humiliating moment and had turned it into a meme. She felt flayed open, her raw nerve endings exposed to the salt of public opinion. A week passed in a blur of tears, takeout, and sleepless nights. On the 8th day, staring at her puffy-eyed reflection, a new, steely resolve settled in her gut. They wanted a show. They wanted to see the jilted girlfriend navigate single life. Fine, but she would do it on her own terms. That night, she created a blog. She used a pseudonym, the Urban Cipher, and a blurred, abstract image as her avatar. The tagline was simple: "Decoding life after I don't." Anonymously. Her first post, titled "The Algorithm of Anger," went live at 2:37 a.m. They say there are stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. What they don't tell you is that anger isn't a stage. It's the operating system. It's the code that runs in the background while you're trying to function, a constant, low-grade hum of "how dare he." Today, my anger compiled a list, not of his good qualities deleted, but of all the things I get to do now that I am no longer half of Julian Elara. Asterisk 1. Eat garlic bread for dinner without commentary. 2. Watch documentaries about deep-sea creatures without feeling intellectually inadequate. 3. Leave my art supplies on the living room floor. 4. Relearn the sound of my own silence. It's not a victory list. It's a survival manual. And Chapter 1 is written in pure, unadulterated fury. Asterisk. She didn't expect anyone to read it. It was a digital scream into the void, a way to untangle the snarled mess of her emotions without an audience of millions judging her every word. The next morning, there was one comment from a user named EchoLocation. The silence is the loudest part, it read. And your survival manual is beautifully written. Keep compiling. I'll be reading. It was the first kind, uncomplicated string of words she'd encountered since the breakup. A single, life-giving drop of water in her emotional desert. She didn't reply, but she held on to it. It was a secret, a tiny, glowing ember in the dark. The blog became her sanctuary. She wrote with a raw, unfiltered honesty she could never afford in her real life, where she was still the museum meltdown girl. As the Urban Cipher, she was free. She wrote about the strange emptiness of her bed, the minefield of social media, the well-meaning but utterly terrible dating advice from friends. She wrote about rediscovering the music Julian had hated, and the quiet triumph of assembling a piece of IKEA furniture by herself. And EchoLocation was always there. His comments weren't long, but they were perceptive. They were a balm. He never offered unsolicited advice, only validation and a quiet, steady understanding that felt profoundly masculine, though she had no proof. On a post about a disastrous first date, he criticized the wine selection. The problem isn't the vintage, it's the company. You deserve a sommelier of the soul. On a post about feeling invisible at a party, sometimes being seen by the wrong people is more lonely than not being seen at all. Months bled into a new season. Elara's life began to slowly, tentatively, reshape itself. She got a promotion at the graphic design firm where she worked. She repainted her apartment, covering the neutral tones Julian had preferred with bold, dramatic colors. The ghost of him was slowly being exorcised, room by room. Her correspondence with EchoLocation evolved. He started leaving longer comments, and soon, they began a dialogue in the private messaging system of the blog. It was safer than the public comments, more intimate. They never shared personal details. No names, no locations, no professions. They talked about books, their favorite corners of the city, their fears, their small triumphs. He was wry, intelligent, and possessed a deep, abiding kindness that seeped through his words. She found herself smiling at her screen, her heart doing a funny little flip when she saw a new message from him. It was a connection she hadn't known she was craving, built not on physical attraction or social convenience, but on the bedrock of shared vulnerability. One rainy Thursday evening, curled on her sofa with a cup of tea, she found herself typing a confession. Cipher. I think I'm scared that what I had with him was my one shot. That the grand, dramatic love story was it. And everything else will just be quiet. EchoLocation. The quiet is where you hear yourself think. And grand, dramatic love stories often have terrible third acts. I'll take a quiet, well-written story with a solid narrative arc any day. Cipher. What if my narrative arc is just a flat line? EchoLocation. Impossible. You feel too deeply for a flat line. Your arc is more of a seismic chart. And for what it's worth, from the fragments you've shared, your story is one I'd very much like to keep reading. Elara's breath caught. This was more than a loyal commenter. This was a courtship. A digital, anonymous, impossibly romantic courtship. She was falling for a username, for a collection of pixels that made her feel more seen than Julian ever had. Meanwhile, her best friend, Chloe, was staging a one-woman intervention. You need to get back out there. For real. Not just in your blog world. A real, live man who doesn't live in your laptop. That's how Elara found herself on a blind date with a man named Ben. He was an architect, Chloe said. Stable, funny kind. The date was pleasant. He was nice. He was perfectly nice. And as he talked about structural integrity and beam loads, all Elara could think about was EchoLocation's message from the night before about the hidden architecture of human connection. At the end of the date, Ben walked her to her door. I had a really nice time, Elara, he said, his smile genuine. Me too, she said, and it wasn't a complete lie. He leaned in for a kiss. It was pleasant, too, but it felt like a betrayal. A betrayal of a man she'd never met. She pulled away gently. I'm sorry. I'm just not quite there yet. Ben was gracious. No problem. Call me if you ever are. She fled into her apartment, her heart pounding with guilt and confusion. She went straight to her blog's dashboard and began to type, her fingers flying across the keys. Cipher, I went on a date tonight. A real one. With a real, flesh-and-blood man who was perfectly lovely. And all I could think about was you. This is insane, right? This connection, it's built on words. It's a phantom limb, but it feels more real to me than the man sitting across from me did. I think I'm in trouble. She hit send before she could lose her nerve. The response was almost immediate. EchoLocation, it's not insane. It's the most sane thing I've experienced in a long time. These words are real. We are real in a way that matters. I feel it too, Cipher. So much. A thrill shot through her, electric and terrifying. He'd said we. EchoLocation, I want to meet you. The words glowed on the screen. This was the precipice. The line between her anonymous sanctuary and the messy, complicated real world. Cipher, I'm scared. EchoLocation, so am I. But I think our story is worth the risk. The Clock Tower Cafe. Saturday, 3 p.m. I'll be the one holding a copy of The Starless Sea, a book about stories within stories. It felt fitting. Her hands were trembling. This was it. The phantom was about to become a man. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Cipher, I'll be there. The 48 hours before Saturday were a special kind of torture. Elara tried on half her wardrobe, settling finally on a simple, dark blue dress that made her feel confident, not like she was trying too hard. She told Chloe she was meeting someone, but offered no details. She couldn't. How could she explain this? She arrived at the Clock Tower Cafe 20 minutes early, her stomach a nest of frantic birds. She chose a table in the corner, with a good view of the door, and ordered a tea she knew she wouldn't be able to drink. She watched the door, her heart hammering against her ribs with every person who entered. At 2 minutes to 3, the door opened again, and her breath hitched. It was him. She knew it instantly. He was tall, with dark, slightly unruly hair and warm, intelligent eyes behind a pair of tortoise-shell glasses. He was holding a copy of The Starless Sea. He was beautiful, in a real, solid, unassuming way. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on her. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and started walking toward her. And then the world stopped, because walking in right behind him, holding the door and laughing at something the first man had said, was Julian. Elara's brain short-circuited. Time slowed, then fractured. Julian's eyes met hers, and his smile vanished, replaced by a look of stunned confusion. The dark-haired man, EchoLocation, reached her table, his smile faltering as he saw the sheer, unadulterated horror on her face. Cipher, he asked, his voice exactly as she'd imagined it, a warm, quiet baritone. Julian reached them, his gaze darting between Elara and the other man. Liam? What are you? Elara? What is this? Liam. His name was Liam, Julian's younger brother, the quiet, reclusive brother who was a writer, the one who lived upstate and whom she'd only met a handful of times at large family gatherings. The brother Julian had always described as a hermit, the brother who had been traveling in South America during the bulk of her relationship with Julian, the brother she had never truly seen. The pieces slammed together in her mind with the force of a physical blow. EchoLocation. Liam, Julian's brother, the man she had been baring her soul to for months, was the brother of the man who had shattered it. The air was sucked from the room. She couldn't breathe. She whispered, staring at Liam, her eyes wide with betrayal. "It's you?" Liam's face was a mask of dawning, horrified comprehension. Oh God, the Urban Cipher. Elara. He looked from her to Julian, his own world visibly collapsing. "You're Julian's Elara?" "I'm not his." The words were a strangled cry. She stumbled to her feet, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The cafe was spinning. She saw it all now, his insightful comments about her relationship, his deep understanding of her pain. It wasn't empathy, it was insider information. He'd been playing her. This was all some sick, twisted game. "Elara, wait, please," Liam pleaded, reaching for her. "Don't touch me." She recoiled as if burned. She looked at Julian, who was still standing there, a baffled and now irritated spectator. "Did you put him up to this? Was this your idea of a joke? To have your brother monitor me? Humiliate me further? I have no idea what you're talking about." Julian snapped. "Liam, what the hell is going on?" But Elara didn't stay to hear the explanation. She fled, for the second time in her life, from a Thorne brother. But this time, the humiliation was infinitely worse. This wasn't a public spectacle. This was a private evisceration. The one safe space she had, the one genuine connection she had forged, was a lie. It had been him all along. Liam Thorne. The fallout was nuclear. Back in her apartment, she deleted the entire blog. She scrubbed its existence from the internet, every post, every comment, every private message. It felt like performing surgery on her own soul. She blocked Liam's number after a torrent of pleading texts and voicemails that she deleted without listening to. "Elara, please. I didn't know. I swear to God, I had no idea it was you. Julian never told me your name. He just called you E. He never showed me pictures. I was away. Please, you have to believe me." The blog. It was the most real thing that's ever happened to me. I fell in love with your mind, with your words. Not with my brother's ex-girlfriend. Please, just talk to me. She didn't believe him. How could she? The coincidence was too monstrous, too cruel. She felt like a pawn in a game whose rules she never understood. Days turned into a week of a new, deeper kind of grief. It was the grief of a double loss. The loss of Liam, the man she'd fallen in love with online, and the loss of the future she'd secretly begun to imagine. The betrayal was a poison, tainting every happy memory from the blog, every comforting word he'd ever written. Chloe, after hearing the whole, sordid tale, was fiercely protective. "He's a thorn. They're all toxic. Cut your losses and never look back." It was sound advice, but it didn't quiet the small, stubborn voice in her head that replayed their conversations. The authenticity in his words. The sheer, statistical improbability that he could have maintained such a complex deception for so long without slipping. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Julian. He showed up at her door, looking uncharacteristically disheveled and uncomfortable. "What do you want?" Elara asked, her voice flat. She had no energy left for anger. "To talk. About Liam." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He's a mess, Elara. A proper mess. He's not speaking to me. He says I ruined the best thing that ever happened to him." Elara crossed her arms, saying nothing. "Look," Julian continued, "I was an idiot. What I did to you is unforgivable. I see that now. But Liam, he's not like me. He's the good one. When I told him about the breakup, I was a jerk about it. I made it sound like you were volatile. I never gave him details. I never even said your full name. He had no idea the Urban Cipher was you. He came to the city months ago, heartbroken over some anonymous blogger who'd ghosted him, and he wouldn't tell me why. Now I know why. Elara's carefully constructed wall of certainty developed a hairline fracture. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think I owe you both this much," Julian said, his shoulders slumping. "And because he really loves you, not the idea of you. He loved you when you were just words on a screen. And for what he's told me about the Urban Cipher, you were pretty spectacular." After Julian left, Elara felt untethered. The poison of betrayal began to dilute, replaced by the terrifying, fragile seed of doubt. What if he was telling the truth? What if their connection had been real? She went for a long walk, the city, noise a dull roar around her. She thought about Liam's comments, his messages, the way he championed her independence, celebrated her small victories, and validated her pain. It didn't feel like the actions of a manipulator. It felt like the actions of a man who was genuinely, deeply in love. She found herself outside the Clock Tower Cafe. She walked in, her heart pounding again. She ordered a coffee and sat at the same table, the ghost of that disastrous meeting clinging to the space. And then she took out her phone. She unblocked his number. Her fingers hovered over the screen. It was the biggest risk of her life. Bigger than throwing a champagne flute, bigger than starting a blog, bigger than agreeing to meet a stranger. She typed a single sentence, the title of his favorite book, the one he'd used as their secret sign. A book about stories within stories. The Starless Sea. She hit send. The response was almost instantaneous, as if he'd been waiting, his phone in his hand. "Can I see you?" He was at the cafe in 10 minutes. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, his hair even more unruly, his eyes shadowed with worry. He stood before her table, hesitant, as if she were a mirage that might disappear. "Can I sit?" he asked, his voice rough. She nodded. He sat, his hands clasped tightly on the table between them. "I didn't know, Elara. From the bottom of my soul, I didn't know. My brother is a self-absorbed idiot who rarely referred to you by name. I knew he'd had a bad breakup, that was it. When I found your blog, it was a random click. I was researching anonymous narrative styles for a writing project. I read your first post, and I was hooked. By you, by your voice. The thought that it was you never, ever crossed my mind." Tears welled in Elara's eyes, but for the first time, they weren't tears of anger or humiliation. They were tears of relief. She believed him. "I deleted the blog," she whispered. "I know. I checked. Every day." He gave her a sad, small smile. It felt like a library had burned down. "I was so hurt," she said, the words trembling. "It felt like the ultimate betrayal. The one place I was safe." "I know," he repeated, his own eyes glistening. "And I'm so sorry for the pain I caused, however unintentionally. But Elara, Cipher, what we had there was real. It is real. I fell in love with a woman who was brave and funny and brilliant and so beautifully, messily human. And when I walked in here and saw that woman was you, it wasn't a shock or a disappointment. It was a miracle. It was the universe connecting two halves of the same story I already knew I loved." He reached across the table, his hand hovering, asking for permission. She looked at his hand, then into his eyes, the eyes of the man who had been her most loyal commenter, her confidant, her echo. She saw the truth there. Not Julian's brother, not a phantom, just Liam. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. The connection, once a fragile thread of digital light, solidified into something unbreakable. "The narrative arc was a little too dramatic for my taste," she said, a real, genuine smile finally breaking through her tears. Liam laughed, a rich, heartfelt sound that filled the space between them. "I don't know," he said, squeezing her hand. "I think it's just getting to the good part." And as they sat in the quiet hum of the cafe, their hands linked, Elara knew he was right. Their story wasn't about a disastrous breakup or a viral video. It wasn't even about a secret blog. It was about two people who found each other in the wreckage, who built a connection word by word, and who are now, finally, ready to write the rest of their story together. Not as the Urban Cipher and EchoLocation, but as Elara and Liam. It was a better beginning than she could have ever imagined.